Hi, my name is Royaa Khoshnevis, and I'm doing my project on Luca, which is the last universal common ancestor. And I'm doing my project essentially on the ancient genes that shaped human life. And then I'm doing it based on the Science Daily Journal for my project. So a little backstory on the origins of life and genetic beginnings. The last universal common ancestor was estimated to have lived around 4 billion years ago. But despite this, some genes have found to be older than this. So it kind of poses a question for scientists. Did genes exist before the first known ancestor of life, or were there some other cellular forms that were there before? So these researchers particularly studied universal paralogs, which were essentially gene families that tended to appear in several copies across living organisms. So they used kind of a tree of life, and they would study how many duplicates there were in these trees. And then the study of these paralogs proved the theory that there were cells that existed before Luca, and this is what ultimately introduced this theory to scientific studies. And then this is kind of a chart showing Luca, how many billion years ago, and then archaea and eukaryotes and bacteria kind of laid out in a graph to make it visual. So a little bit on how scientists identified ancient genes. They used these universal paralogs and they examined the tree of life, like I said. They used technological biology, evolutionary reconstruction, and a little bit of like modern technology and AI-based tools in order to gain a lot of knowledge on the topic. It made the study significantly more efficient, and they were able to determine the age and ancestor of the genes, and they were later discovered to exist before the human life on Earth. So by observing this tree of life and kind of comparing the gene duplicates, they could note the duplications and pinpoint the genes that really predated earlier cellular life. And then these tools really allowed researchers to construct systems that explained why molecular systems had forms such as like protein function and membrane function and how that related to the beginning of human life on Earth. And then this is kind of a chart showing the tree of life and how it looked. So some discoveries in genetic elements before human life. Ultimately, universal paralogs were the precursors to human life on Earth, and they really originated before the last universal common ancestor. This is what scientists found throughout the study and what they really researched and looked into. So many ancient genes were found to be used for protein synthesis and membrane transport, coming before human life on Earth, and it really set humans up for the functions that our bodies use naturally and that are kind of universal through all species. So this finding really implied that protein production and membrane functions in the human body were the first biological processes to evolve, and our ancient genes in cells were already capable of performing these functions before we came to be on Earth. So when set up properly, these proteins showed that there was earlier versions of genes that could both attach to the membranes and interact with the systems to form proteins. And this really helped scientists prove that these cells were used for human life and it wasn't kind of a random upcoming of human life on Earth. So altogether, these findings really challenge the ideas that life, like I said, emerged suddenly or in a random manner, but instead life was a gradual transition of chemical atoms and chemical forms into biological ones of life, and the molecules kind of they were the building blocks of our life as humans and kind of made us come to what we have been. And then, so what this means in terms of understanding human life. So before finding these discoveries, scientists lacked a clear and definite explanation of why pre-life molecules in early cells on Earth related to humans on Earth. And it's not fully confirmed, but scientists are closer than ever to detecting the meaning of life forms on Earth prior to the human existence. So these universal paralogs really provided kind of a bridge between chemical atoms and biological functions on Earth, like protein synthesis and membrane functions. And due to this, scientists have a strong evidence towards these theories, so they can now suggest that life did in fact emerge from chemical systems and cellular and genetic life forms, and not kind of a random matter, and that they were kind of more evolving way before humans came to be on Earth. So ultimately, these findings really brought scientists closer to understanding the origins of human life on Earth, and it allowed researchers to understand the fundamental functions of life and the biological functions that happen between every species on Earth and how humans came to be even before we were kind of existing on Earth as a society. So these are the references I use. This is the Science Daily Journal, and then this is another journal I helped to use build my conclusion. Thank you.